Welcome back to Applied Mathematics. In this video, I want to talk about multiplication and division. As has happened in previous videos, I want to first address the elephant in the room. Yes, there is nothing in this lesson that you can't do in a calculator faster than you can do by hand. No, I am not going to directly assess you on these skills. Yes, they are still important. Even though I'm not going to often ask you to do these skills with simple whole numbers by hand, I am going to be looking at similar things coming up with variables and with expressions throughout the course. And if you have the foundational skills under control, the more advanced stuff is going to be fairly straightforward. If you struggle with the basics, the more advanced stuff is going to be more of a challenge. So my expectation is that you are already familiar with all the things that I'm about to talk about. Some of them it may have been a while since you thought about, so a chance to reflect, rehash, and review whatever you need to so that you'll be prepared going into the rest of the course. Let me get my head out of the way. And let's start with signed numbers. The rule for signed numbers is pretty straightforward. Whether you are multiplying or dividing, if the values have the same sign, the result is positive. Whether you are multiplying or dividing, if the values have different signs, then the result is negative. Right. So if I have -3 times -4, well, 3 times 4 is 12. They're both negative, which is the same sign, which means the result is positive. If I have 4 times -3, 4 times 3 is still 12. The signs are different in this case, so the result comes out negative. Dividing, if I have 12 divided by -4, 12 divided by 4 is 3. Signs are different. The result here is negative. Whether the negative is in the numerator or in the denominator. What I was talking about in the video on addition and subtraction. Yes, you can have a negative in the denominator of a fraction, but it's better to just have it in the numerator or out in front entirely. The other thing that I want to point out here, if I had that negative in both the numerator and the denominator, -12 divided by -4, now these have the same sign. And when they have the same sign, the result comes out as positive. Right? So negative can be in the numerator, can be in the denominator, but not both. Multiplying with fractions is probably the easiest of all of the operations on fractions. The general rule says that if you have two fractions, a over b and c over d, you multiply across a times c and b times d. So if I have 3/7 times 5 over 11, I get 3 times 5, which is 15, 7 times 11, which is 77. One of the things that I like to point out on multiplying fractions, though, is to always keep in mind that whenever you're working with fractions, you always have to reduce the fraction at the end, which means looking for common factors. So if you have something like, I don't know, 4/9 times 15 over 22. Yes, you can just multiply. 4 times 15 is 60. 9 times 22 is 198. Now you have 60 over 198, and you need to find common factor between them to reduce. You can make your life a lot easier by thinking about that ahead of time. Four and 22 are both even. 4 is 2 times 2. 22 is 2 times 11. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 22 divided by 2 is 11. Now we are reduced because we've gotten rid of that factor of 2. We can do the same thing on the other side. 9 is 3 times 3. 15 is 3 times 5. We can get rid of a factor of 3. And so we are left with 2 times 5 over 3 times 11, which is 10 over 33. And I think that's a lot easier than trying to figure out the common factor of 6 between 60 and 198. Dividing fractions is where things get a little bit strange, but much like dealing with subtraction, the real clue is to think about division as a special case of multiplication. So let's take a look at, say, 2/5 divided by 3/7. When you have subtraction, you leave the number on the left alone, you change subtraction to addition, you take the opposite of the one on the right. When you have division, you leave the number on the left alone. You change division into multiplication, and then you take the reciprocal of the number on the right. Taking the reciprocal means flip the numerator and the denominator. So 3/7 becomes 7/3. 2/5 times 7/3. Multiply across the top. 2 times 7 is 14. Multiply across the bottom. 5 times 3 is 15. That can get a little bit weird when you have whole numbers and fractions combined together. For example, 3/8 divided by 2. The trick here is to remember that a fraction is a division problem. And of all of the division problems, dividing by 1 is the easiest because it doesn't do anything. So I can write 2 as 2 divided by 1. Without having changed anything at all. That is a really nice trick. Mathematicians' favorite trick is to either add 0, multiply by 1, or divide by 1, depending on what's useful in a particular application, and do it in a way that changes the problem in a more useful sense. So in this case, we divide by 1. Dividing by 1 doesn't do anything. Why would you do it? Well, because you can, and once you've done it, now all of a sudden your whole number looks like a fraction. So in any context, whenever you have whole numbers and fractions going on at the same time, you can use this trick. Your whole number looks like a fraction now, and you can work with it as though it was a fraction, and everything works nicely. All right. All told, not a whole lot to talk about in this video as in the last one. I hope that this is all familiar. I hope it is all coming back to you. If it's not, you're more than welcome to go through some practice problems. I can turn to a calculator, I guess. I can show you, if I hit the right button, there we go. I can show you that these operations work on a calculator the same as any others. So, once again, hitting that fraction key, let's go with 3 over 8 divided by 2, which my calculator is able to do for me without any issue whatsoever. So once again, the particular problems that we've looked at in this video involved some relatively easy to work with numbers. There's no ugly decimals, there's no giant numbers going on. It's a chance for you to make sure that you understand the basic rules of multiplication and division. Yes, a calculator can do all of this for you. Yes, as soon as we get to more complicated numbers, larger numbers, decimal numbers, I'm going to immediately say grab out your calculator and we're going to stop doing anything by hand at all. But it's worth taking the time, making sure that you know how this works by hand, so that later on in the course, when we're trying to do the same sorts of things, but there's variables all throughout everything, it's not going to be any different. It's just going to follow the same rules, and we will know what we're doing. But for now, I think that's a good place to stop. So as always, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.